Hello. I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes now about how voice works in literature. And to do that, I'm going to ask you to consider the voice you're hearing right now. My voice. I want to point out two things about this voice. First, I don't talk like this normally. I'm lecturing, so I'm talking more slowly and pausing more than I would in ordinary conversation. Second, I've written a script for what I'm saying, so these words are words I chose a while ago to say now. I'm not choosing my words in the moment the way that I ordinarily would in conversation. So with that in mind, we can think of voice in literature as the implied character that tells a story. And I refer to this as an implied character because although we can't identify the voice with the writer of the story, the voice also doesn't always appear in the story as a character. It often exists in some sort of outside space that doesn't quite exist in the story, so I have to think of it as an implied character. Of course, sometimes it does appear in the story. As you've probably guessed, this is what happens in first-person narration. The voice comes from one of the story's characters. In these cases, we can identify the voice pretty easily, and we can base some of our ideas about the story on the character's position, its desires, and so forth. For instance, we can get a good idea about the values of everyday use because its narrative voice, Mama, tells us what those values are. By making the story filtered through her experience, Walker tells us that the values that she represents are the values that represent the reality of the story. But a more complicated view comes with third-person narration. Because the voice doesn't come from a character in the story, we can't as easily figure out its attitude toward the people in the story. For example, what does the voice of the lottery think about the events in that story? Does the voice's refusal to express emotions give us ideas about how to react or what to pay attention to? The more we think about questions of this kind, the more we can think about what the story wants to say, and thinking about voice helps us to formulate these questions. So I hope that this lecture has helped you think about how a story's voice affects how we read. When we see that voice as a kind of guide to interpretation, we give ourselves more ways to incorporate what we read into what we think. When we consider the voice that we hear in our head as we read, the tone of that voice, what that voice seems to emphasize or leave out, we give ourselves the opportunity to ask more questions about what the story is trying to tell us. As always, thank you for your time and attention.